I'm not gonna lie. I think I'm gonna have you all very surprised at my ranking list today. Hello everybody, Nicky Marra here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you've all had a fabulous week and are ready for yet another fun ranking video. And today is a little bit different than most of the other videos on my channel, as today we are hopping off the screen and landing with 2 feet on the Broadway stage. Yes, as an avid theater kid and a former theater major, I am no stranger to the land of musical theater. And in fact, I would probably even say that secondary to Disney, musical theater is probably one of my biggest passions in life. And so when you take my first biggest passion, which is Disney, and my second biggest passion, which is musical theater, and go, what do we get? Disney on Broadway. Yes, friends, Disney Theatrical Group has probably created some of the most iconic shows to ever grace the Broadway stage, taking some of our most favorite animated movies and translating them into real-life magic right before our eyes. With some brand new songs, some absolutely stunning costumes, and a little bit of Disney magic, all of these movies have come to life on the big Broadway stage. And so today, friends, we are going to take a look back through Broadway history, and today I am going to rank 10 of my all-time favorite Disney on Broadway shows. But if you are new to the channel, hi, my name's Nicky Marra and I am a Disney content creator. I got my start over on TikTok, but have joined the YouTube community and have been loving making long-form videos for you guys, of which I have brand new long-form videos coming out every single Friday at 5 p.m. The majority of which we dive into a lot of Disney's animated movies and characters, but every so often I like to put out a video like this where we kind of shake things up a little bit. And so if you've decided to join us for this video, welcome. I am so happy you're here. And make sure to hit subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic that is coming here to the channel. And likewise, if you'd like to find me on any of my other social medias, my handle is @NickyMarra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, in addition to here on YouTube. And as always on the channel, before we jump into today's ranking list, I do have some brief disclaimers and then conditions for our list today. But if you'd like to jump right into our ranking video, then you can head right to this timestamp. First and foremost, for the disclaimers, I'm not associated with the Walt Disney Company, and therefore I don't speak for the brand or the company, and any and all opinions in this video are just my own and do not reflect those of the brand or the company. But secondly, I welcome any and all opinions surrounding these incredible Disney on Broadway shows. So if you have gotten the chance to see one of these absolutely wonderful shows, make sure to tell me literally everything about it. I need to know all the details. And if you either have a Disney on Broadway show or the soundtrack that you particularly gravitate to, make sure to let me know why down below. But thirdly, for the disclaimers, I do want to give a brief spoiler warning for all of the Disney on Broadway shows we're going to be talking about today, as we will be going into the plot of each individual show as a part of the talking points for today's list. And so if you don't want anything spoiled for a particular Disney Broadway show, then I would recommend just skipping on up to the next number on today's list. But as for the conditions for our list today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 favorite Disney on Broadway shows. Because I am limiting today's list to a top 10, that does mean that not every Disney on Broadway show is going to be talked about in today's video. So again, if you really like a Disney on Broadway show that didn't make my ranking, then I more than welcome you to leave all of your thoughts on that show down below. And while there aren't a ton of conditions, I am primarily prioritizing shows that have been created by Disney that have graced the Broadway stage. Although I will say, not every single show on today's list has been on Broadway. But trust me when I say, I think you're gonna be okay with it. As the few that have not are fantastic, like so unbelievably good, and I just had to talk about them in some way, shape, or form in this video. So as long as there's been a professional production of said show, I think it's okay to include it on today's list. But with that being said, I am intentionally excluding one particular Disney on Broadway show, which is Hercules, which has not yet debuted. There has been professional productions of it done before, however, it is not necessarily readily accessible, seeing as there's not an original cast recording, and so maybe in the future, we will make another video about Hercules on Broadway, or the West End. I know it's coming to the West End first, but maybe we'll make another video in the future. But besides that, that's pretty much it for the conditions. Just has to be a Disney on Broadway show, and there has to be at least one professional production of it, so yeah, that's our conditions. Now friends, very quickly before we jump into today's list, I can hear some of you wondering, Nicky, have you seen all of these Broadway productions? What gives you any sort of authority to rank these said productions? Well, dear viewer, good question. Yes, considering Disney on Broadway started all the way back in the 90s, and I didn't come into this world until the year 2000, there is no way. In fact, the majority of these I have not seen in person. However, we are going to jump into a very brief and sort of touchy subject in the world of musical theater, which is bootlegs. Now, here on my channel is not the place where we are going to discuss the moral validity of recording illegally a Broadway show. There are rules in Broadway shows that you're not allowed to record. However, I see some pros to it considering the show can live on past the Broadway run. And so, yes, while I don't condone bootlegging a professional production in any way, shape, or form, I have to say, in a way, I'm kind of glad that bootlegs exist of all of these Disney on Broadway shows. I'm sorry, Disney on Broadway? Because yes, in all honesty, it is the surfacing of Disney on Broadway bootlegs on the internet that allows all of us to relive all of these Broadway shows which have since closed. Well, the majority of them. But with that being said, if a show is still running, I absolutely 100% recommend not watching the bootleg and actually going to experience it in person, because that has always been and will always be the absolute best experience you could ever have with a Broadway show. And so anyway, that's my 2 cents on the whole bootlegging dilemma. I feel guilty watching them, but oh my god, again, with no other way to experience these original Broadway productions, they leave me no choice. And so yes, support live theater. Always, 100%. It's a beautiful art form. Go see a show. All right, sorry, stepping off the soapbox now, let's talk through the brief talking points we're going to be sure to touch on for each individual Broadway show. First and foremost, we are going to be identifying the Broadway show and also identifying the opening and closing date, meaning the date that it premiered on a stage and also the last performance of that Broadway show. We're going to be talking about significant awards or milestones that that production achieved in its runtime. We're going to talk about a brief synopsis of the Broadway show. We'll be talking about the major leading actors, probably limiting it to maybe 4 at the most. We're going to be talking about any significant story changes or enhancements that the Broadway show saw as opposed to its original movie. And finally, we will be talking about any standout stage effects that could have been seen in the Broadway show, meaning any superior costumes, any great puppetry, any set locations, or even an incredible vocal moment, perhaps, by a performer. Anything that made the production stand out, we are going to be sure to touch on for each Broadway musical. But with that being said, friends, I believe we are ready to jump into my top 10 favorite Disney on Broadway shows. And if you are ready to jump into today's list, then sit back, relax, grab yourself a snack and a drink, and let's start the ranking of Disney on Broadway shows. We are starting today's list all the way down at the bottom at number 10, which is Tarzan. Now, the Broadway production of Tarzan originally opened on May 10th of 2006, and it ran for just over a year, closing on July 8th of 2007. As for significant awards and milestones, it was in fact nominated for a Tony Award for Best Lighting Design. And as for the plot of the Broadway show, it is in fact based on the animated version that Disney created, telling the story of Tarzan, who is a young boy who is rescued and raised by gorillas after his parents' shipwreck. As Tarzan grows up, he struggles to reconcile his human instincts with his more animal upbringing. When explorers like the curious Jane Porter arrive, Tarzan must eventually choose whether to go with his new human friends or to remain with his gorilla family. The major leading actors in the original Broadway production included Josh Strickland as Tarzan and Jen Gambatese as Jane Porter. As for the significant story changes that were included in the Broadway production, new songs were written by Phil Collins in order to help with character development, and the stage adaptation actually expanded the relationship between Tarzan and his gorilla family. For the standout stage effects, a lot of aerial choreography was included, which allowed actors to swing across the Broadway stage on false vines, which really helped to bring the jungle environment to life. In addition, there was also intricate vine set pieces, which really helped to create a dynamic and immersive atmosphere within the Broadway theater. In doing research for the production, I actually found so many people saying that the intro to the show, which told the backstory of Tarzan's parents being shipwrecked in the jungle, was actually one of the major standout moments of the show, seeing as it was done with like aerial movements again, where you, the audience, would see it almost from above. If you happen to find a bootleg online, it is such a sight to behold, but it is so unbelievably beautiful. And while I do love the story of Tarzan and actually really like the fact that in the Broadway show, a lot of the music is sung by the characters and not Phil Collins himself, much like it was in the original animated movie, this Broadway musical still does tend to fall towards the bottom of my list. And it's not for any fault of the production, it's just there are actually a lot of really wonderful Disney on Broadway shows that I just happen to like a little bit more. But yes, Tarzan absolutely had to make it onto my list because I know this one is absolutely a fan favorite, and it actually has still found success to this day in professional productions overseas. So yes, Tarzan on Broadway absolutely makes my top 10 of my favorite Disney on Broadway shows. Next, we're gonna move on up to number 9 on my list, which is probably going to shock like 99% of my audience if you've ever seen a video of mine before. As at number 9, is The Little Mermaid on Broadway. Yes, I know, it's okay, take a deep breath. Ariel is not at number 1 today, but in fact at number 9. Let's get into all the reasons why. The Little Mermaid on Broadway opened on January 10th of 2008 and closed just about a year and a half later, around August 30th, 2009. As for the significant awards or milestones, it was in fact nominated for 2 Tony Awards. And as for the story of this musical, which again is quite similar to the original animated movie. The Little Mermaid on Broadway follows Ariel, who is a mermaid princess who dreams of living her life on land in the human world. After making a very dangerous deal with the sea witch Ursula to trade her human voice for legs, Ariel must win the love of the human Prince Eric within 3 days or she will lose her soul forever. With the help of her friends Flounder, Scuttle, and Sebastian, Ariel learns that love can conquer any challenge. As for the major leading actors of the original Broadway production, the leading role of Princess Ariel was played by actress Sierra Boggess, the evil and cunning Ursula was portrayed by Sherry Renee Scott, and King Triton was played by Norm Lewis. As for the significant story changes that were made for the Broadway production, additional songs were written for multiple characters, including Her Voice, which was a song for Prince Eric. World Above and Beyond My Wildest Dreams were 2 songs written for Ariel, and If Only was a quartet written for Ariel, Eric, Sebastian, and King Triton. In addition to the changes, Ursula's backstory was updated and expanded to now tell the story of how she and King Triton were siblings, which was in fact a story plot written for the original animated movie. However, in editing, that little detail got left out. So it's still implied in the movie, but in the Broadway production, it was definite. And as for the major standout effects on stage, the performers actually used Heelys in order to mimic swimming in the water. There was no actual water used in the entire production, and so a lot of the set pieces were made to look like water, and in order to achieve that gliding effect of swimming through the water, the performers used Heelys, which were like a sneaker that had a little wheel in the heel. They were very popular back in the 2000s. And because no water was used in the production, the underwater world was brought to life with intricate set pieces and wonderful lighting designs, as well as a lot of shimmering costumes. Now, as for the reason why The Little Mermaid on Broadway doesn't quite reach the top of my list the way it normally does in a lot of my other ranking videos, well, let me start off by saying that this is actually one of the few productions that I have actually seen. I didn't see it on Broadway itself, but before this production transferred to Broadway, it actually did play previews in Denver, Colorado. And on a family trip, I was lucky enough to see one of the previews of the Broadway show. Of course, you all know I love the story of The Little Mermaid. However, I just feel as though this is a very difficult production to translate into real life. And while the Broadway production was absolutely beautiful, I do think there are a few things when seeing it live on stage just feel a little strange. For example, the Ariel costume had human legs where Sierra Boggess would wheel around using her Heelys, but she also had a false tail that came out the back of her dress. So sometimes you would be looking at Ariel head on and would see her fin straight down, like where her legs would be. But when she turned to the side, her tail would be behind her. There were certain moments where this worked very well, such as when she leaned over one of the rocks and the tail would come up behind her. But the majority of the time, it was a little strange to see Ariel with two tails, meaning one that was encasing her legs and also another one that was coming out the back of her dress. That's the major one for me, and there's a lot of like little things like that in the production that kind of just felt slightly off all over the place. But likewise, overall, the vocals of this production are like stellar. The brand new songs are gorgeous, and I'm kind of really sad that The Little Mermaid on Broadway really only lasted about a year and a half. Y'all know how much I love Princess Ariel, and I think she deserved so much more time to grace the Broadway stage. But next we're gonna move on up to number 8 on my list, which is the Broadway musical Newsies. Now, the original Broadway production of Newsies opened on March 29th of 2012 and closed on August 24th, 2014. As for the significant awards and milestones of the production, it did in fact win 2 Tony Awards in 2012 for not only Best Original Score, but also Best Choreography. In addition, this musical developed such a strong and intense fan base, which eventually led to a national tour of the production, as well as a filmed version for Disney+, which you are still able to watch now. As for the plot of this Broadway production, Newsies is set in 1899 New York City, telling the story of Jack Kelly, a very charismatic newsboy who dreams of a better life. When newspaper tycoons Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst raise the distribution prices on the newsboys, Jack rallies his fellow newsies to strike. This musical celebrates the power of community and standing up for what is right. The major leading actors of the original Broadway production include Jeremy Jordan as Jack Kelly and Cara Lindsay as Catherine Plummer. Now, as for the significant story changes, because believe it or not, this was actually a movie before it was a musical. The character of Catherine Plummer was written into the new Broadway production, and she was created as a female reporter, Jack Kelly's love interest, and a strong female lead in an original movie which didn't have one. In addition, the storyline was adjusted to emphasize the power of the press and the unity of the newsboys. But as for the standout stage effects in this production, this set featured a massive movable scaffolding that allowed for really dynamic choreography. In addition, there were high-energy dance numbers, including impressive flips and leaps, and the tap numbers were a visual highlight. Overall, I love this production. I am absolutely a massive Newsies fan. I think the music is absolutely iconic, not only in the Disney community, but also in the Broadway community. And this show absolutely holds its own. It is so strong, and I have so many friends that this is one of their favorite shows, and absolutely goes without saying. I think probably the only reason that this one doesn't reach my absolute top favorites is because I'm very partial to a lot of other, like, Disney animated movies, and so that would be the main reason. But I really love this production, and I am so unbelievably grateful that we are still able to experience the magic of this Broadway production through the recording on Disney+. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 7 on my list, which is Aladdin on Broadway. Now, Aladdin on Broadway originally opened on March 10th of 2014, and as of recording this video in February of 2025, the production is still up and running, which means no bootlegs. Go see it in person if you're able to. As for the significant awards and milestones, this musical won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical, won by James Monroe Iglehart, who was the original Genie. In addition, it also reached the milestone of 10 years of being on Broadway. As for the plot of the Broadway show, Aladdin follows the street-smart young man who once again dreams of a better life. After discovering a magical lamp that contains a wish-granting genie, Aladdin embarks on a journey to win the heart of Princess Jasmine and thwart the schemes of the evil sorcerer Jafar. With the genie's help, Aladdin learns a lot of really important lessons, including the lesson of being true to himself, which eventually earns him his rightful place as a prince. As for the major leading actors in the original Broadway production, Aladdin was played by Adam Jacobs, Princess Jasmine was originated by actress Courtney Reed, and James Monroe Iglehart played the original Genie on Broadway, winning the Tony Award. As for the significant story changes that were made to the Broadway show from the original animated movie, the character Iago was reimagined as a human sidekick for Jafar. In addition, 3 brand new characters were also introduced to the new Broadway show, and they are Babcock, Omar, and Kasim, who are Aladdin's 3 friends. In addition, new music was of course written for Princess Jasmine to have a solo song, and original songs that were going to appear in Aladdin the movie actually made it into Aladdin on Broadway. As for the major standout effects, the magic carpet ride during the song A Whole New World currently still absolutely astounds audiences, as the magic of how this happens technically still has never been revealed. In addition, Genie's elaborate entrances and exits absolutely shock, and the quick costume changes are an absolute fan favorite. Aladdin on Broadway is such a spectacle, and I think there is so much to be said that this production is still running more than 10 years later. While I've never seen it on Broadway, I have seen a touring production which was absolutely phenomenal, and I'm hoping one day to actually see it on the Great White Way. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 6 on my list, which is the Broadway musical Mary Poppins. Now, Mary Poppins originally opened on November 16th of 2006 and closed on March 3rd of 2013. As for the significant awards and milestones of the production, Mary Poppins was nominated for 7 Tony Awards in 2007 and actually won the Tony Award for Best Scenic Design. In addition, this is also one of Disney's longest-running Broadway shows with just about 7 years under its belt. As for the plot of this Broadway show, this musical takes place in Edwardian London, where the Banks family finds themselves in turmoil until a very magical nanny, Mary Poppins, appears into their lives. With the help of her friend Bert, Mary Poppins takes the Banks children on whimsical adventures, while also teaching their parents the value of imagination and familial love. And as always, her influences perfectly transform the household. As for the major leading actors in the original production of Mary Poppins, Ashley Brown is the actress that originated the role of Mary Poppins on Broadway, and Bert was originated by actor Gavin Lee. As for the significant story changes that were brought about by the Broadway production, the Broadway production actually included more of the story elements originally written by P.L. Travers in the original Mary Poppins book, including additional adventures and also some darker themes. Likewise, Mrs. Banks' character was reimagined from a suffragette into a former actress. As for the major standout stage effects that came about with this Broadway show, the Step in Time tap number was absolutely a standout of this show, featuring gravity-defying choreography with Bert tap dancing upside down along the proscenium. Likewise, the iconic ending of the show saw Mary Poppins herself fly over the audience. This finale absolutely amazed audiences and absolutely stuns in some very rare clips. Overall, Mary Poppins absolutely lands super high on my list of Broadway shows, as I have also seen this production in a professional setting, but it wasn't an official Broadway production or touring production. This musical is so magical and absolutely is upgraded for a more adult audience, while also still being able to be enjoyed by kids. The Broadway production really takes the movie and just sophisticates it a little bit more and creates a lot of magical moments from the movie, but right in front of your eyes, which makes it all the more cool. Let me tell you, this original Broadway cast is like perfection. And yeah, if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to the original Broadway production, I highly recommend checking out the soundtrack. And if you can find any clips on YouTube, I'm sure you will not be disappointed. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 5 on my list, the halfway point of today's ranking list, which is Frozen on Broadway. Now, Frozen on Broadway originally opened on March 22nd of 2018 and unfortunately closed on March 11th, 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As for the significant awards or milestones, it was in fact nominated for 3 Tony Awards and was nominated for them back in the year 2018, and one of the awards that it was nominated for included Best Musical. As for the plotline of this original Broadway show, Frozen follows the story of 2 royal sisters, Princess Elsa and Princess Anna. Of course, they start off as princess. Eventually, we know they become queens. After Elsa's special ability to be able to control ice and snow is revealed to the kingdom of Arendelle, plunging the kingdom into an eternal winter, she flees to the North Mountain. Anna, along with Kristoff, his reindeer Sven, and the adorable little snowman Olaf, must embark on a daring adventure to bring home her sister Elsa and to save Arendelle from the bitter cold. As for the major leading actors in the original production, the role of Queen Elsa was originated by actress Casey Levy, the role of Princess Anna was played by Patty Murin, and Jelani Aladdin originated the role of Kristoff. As for the significant story changes that were made to the original Broadway production, in the original animated movie where you could see trolls, in the Broadway production you actually saw magical spirits. Likewise, additional songs were also written for both sisters, including the song Monster for Elsa and True Love for Anna. Both of these songs really helped to add to both of the sisters' story arcs. In addition, the stage production also gave a much bigger backstory on Anna and Elsa's parents. And I know this doesn't include the original cast, but eventually a song was written to replace, for the first time in Forever Reprise, which is one of my favorite Disney songs of all time, which is called I Can't Lose You. Every time I talk about the show, I just have to mention that song because it is so unbelievably beautiful. But as for the stage effects, both ice and snow effects were created using projection mapping, which happened all over the proscenium and the set. By projection mapping the entire stage, production could essentially create ice and snow wherever they wanted to. In addition, the transformation of Elsa's dress during the song Let It Go absolutely astounded audiences, as the dress transformation was actually achieved through a quick change stage effect. There are videos here on YouTube of the dress transformation, and it still is absolutely fantastic to see. And while I have never seen this production in person, I absolutely want to make my way over to a touring company, as I have been dying to see this show in person. But from everything that I have seen, I am absolutely confident in ranking this show at the halfway point of today's list. And I cannot wait to see it in person. Oh my god, I'm dying to see it. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 4 on my list, the only show on today's list to not appear on Broadway or the West End. At number 4 is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, as for a brief production history of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, it actually premiered in Berlin, Germany in the year 1999. A production was eventually created in the United States at La Jolla Playhouse in the year 2014, and later brought to the Paper Mill Playhouse in 2015. But unfortunately, it did not ever transfer to Broadway. As for significant awards or milestones, it unfortunately was never nominated for a Tony, seeing as it never made it to Broadway, but the original German production actually did run for a solid 3 years. As for the overall plot of this musical, it was indeed adapted from Victor Hugo's novel, bringing in a lot more of the darker tones. The Hunchback of Notre Dame musical, of course, focuses on Quasimodo, who is the deformed bell ringer of the Notre Dame Cathedral, and tells the story of his struggle for acceptance as the world shuns him. He eventually befriends the kind and compassionate Esmeralda, who is a Romani woman accused of practicing witchcraft. Eventually, Quasimodo must face his cruel adoptive father, the Archdeacon Claude Frollo, and choose between loyalty and love. As for the leading actors in the original production, in the US production, Michael Arden originated the role of Quasimodo, and actress Ciara Renée originated the role of Esmeralda. And funnily enough, Ciara Renée actually went on to later play Queen Elsa in the Frozen production. As for the significant story changes, this one's actually really interesting considering the stage version actually adopted a lot more of the plot points from Victor Hugo's novel, which is a very dark story. The gargoyles in the animated movie are actually transformed into an almost stone chorus of sorts. And unfortunately, seeing as we bring in a lot more of the darker story plot, Esmeralda actually does not survive in the stage version. Likewise, the story has a lot more of a tragic ending, and while there are recordings of this production online, I am going to warn you, this one is really sad. You don't come out with a happy ending here. This was definitely a risk on behalf of the Disney company, considering, well, Disney's very protective over their characters, and changing the plot this drastically to a point where one of the leading characters actually doesn't survive was quite a big risk. But I will say, I have to be completely honest, it pays off. It is really hard-hitting. And as for the major standout stage effects, the use of a large onstage choir really helps with building emotion throughout the story, making this a powerful and immersive musical event. Likewise, the set design actually features Notre Dame itself, including large bells and also a lot of really beautiful stained glass. Overall, with all of the risks this production took, I think this one absolutely pays off. Still not amongst my top favorites, but my goodness, this is a sight to behold, and I absolutely love the stage production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Ooh, next, friends, we're moving on up to number 3 on my list. At number 3 is The Lion King on Broadway. Now, The Lion King on Broadway opened on November 13th of 1997, and as of filming this video in February of 2025, the production is still ongoing. As for the significant awards that the original production won, this musical won 6 Tony Awards in the year 1998, including Best Musical and Best Direction of a Musical, which was won by director Julie Taymor. And this musical later became the highest grossing Broadway production of all time. As for the plot of the Broadway musical, The Lion King on Broadway follows the epic journey of Simba, who is a young lion prince who flees the kingdom after the death of his father at the hand of his uncle Scar. Guided by the carefree duo of Pumbaa and Timon, Simba grows into adulthood and must eventually return to the Pride Lands to fulfill his destiny as the future king and restore balance to the circle of life. As for the major leading actors in the original Broadway production, Jason Reyes originated the role of Simba, the role of Nala was originated by actress Heather Headley, and Samuel E. Wright was the original Mufasa on Broadway, who you might recognize as the voice of Sebastian in the Little Mermaid movie. And as for the significant story changes that were made to the Broadway show, additional songs and scenes were added to create more context behind a lot of the characters, as well as to further explore the African culture of the story, such as in the song Shadowland, which is sung by Nala, which also happens to be another of my absolute favorite Disney songs. I love Shadowland. Likewise, the role of Rafiki was also changed from originally being a male baboon into a female performer. I don't know, in my opinion, I think this change is like so subtle, but like adds so much heart to the production. And as for the major standout effects of the Broadway show, there is extremely innovative use of puppetry and masks to bring the animals to life on stage. All of the puppetry, it truly creates such a stunning visual of the African savanna. Likewise, the opening, the Circle of Life sequence, featured actors parading through all of the aisles of the theater, portraying various animals and really immersing the audience in the story right from the get-go. This production is breathtaking. I have in fact seen a touring production of the show, but still have never yet seen it on Broadway, although I am going to make it there one day. I promise I have to see this at some point. I think The Lion King on Broadway is so wonderful that I'm gonna say something about this Broadway show that I say for very few others, which is that the Broadway show is actually my favorite medium of the story being told. Meaning, I actually prefer the Broadway show to the original animated movie. That's not the case with a lot of Disney on Broadway shows, but with this one, it is the case. I much prefer the Broadway stage version of this story to the animated movie. That might be a controversial opinion, but regardless, I love this Broadway show. Absolutely deserving of spot number 3 on my list. But with that, friends, we're moving on up to number 2 on my list. We're getting to my favorites. At number 2 is Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. Yes, Disney's original Broadway production. Now, Beauty and the Beast on Broadway opened on April 18th of 1994 and eventually closed on July 29th of 2007. As for the significant awards or milestones reached by the production, it was nominated for 9 Tony Awards in 1994, winning 1 for Best Costume Design. This also became the 10th longest running Broadway show in Broadway history at the time of its closing. Now, as for the plot of the musical, based on the beloved animated film Beauty and the Beast tells the story of Belle, who is a bookish young woman who finds herself held captive in an enchanted castle. That enchanted castle belonging to a cursed beast. Over time, Belle befriends the enchanted objects that inhabit the castle and discovers a kind heart beneath the beast's fearsome exterior. Their blossoming romance is the key to breaking the spell and restoring harmony to the castle and all of its subjects. As for the major leading actors in the original Broadway production, the role of Belle was originated by Susan Egan, who you might recognize as the voice of Megara in Disney's Hercules. Terrence Mann originated the role of the Beast on Broadway, and Gary Beach was the original Lumiere. As for the significant story changes to the original Broadway production, additional songs were added to expand character arcs and story plot, including the song Home, which was written for Belle, and the song If I Can't Love Her, which was written for the Beast. Seeing as this was a relatively shorter Disney animated movie and it had to be fleshed out in order to create a huge 2-hour Broadway spectacle, a lot of scenes were expanded or modified to provide more depth to the supporting characters, which really helped audiences to latch on to all of the characters in the show. And as for the standout stage effects, the transformation from the Beast to the Prince was absolutely a standout in the original production. It was achieved through the combination of lighting effects, costumes, and stage mechanics, which were all brought together to create an absolutely unforgettable visual effect. Likewise, the song Be Our Guest was an absolutely over-the-top musical number, featuring elaborate choreography, dazzling costumes, and impressive set pieces that brought all of the enchanted objects of the castle to life. Being Disney's first Broadway production, Beauty and the Beast is absolutely stunning. Looking back at these costumes, it is truly like the animated movie brought to life. Oh, how I wish I could have seen the original Broadway production, but I will just have to hear the beautiful stories from my mother, who actually got to see it a few times on Broadway. And although I didn't get to see the original Broadway production, there is actually a brand new touring company of the production coming to the United States at some point within the next year, so I'm absolutely gonna have to do my best to make sure I get to see the tour. I love Beauty and the Beast, and I think this is the perfect Broadway musical that could have started Disney's Broadway adventures, and it absolutely lands as one of my favorites. But not quite number one. But with that, friends, we have reached number one on my list of favorite Disney on Broadway productions. Have you possibly guessed what it could be? And my guess is that you have not, as I'm guessing my favorite Broadway production is probably one that not too many people know about, not right away at least. As my favorite Disney on Broadway production of all time is the musical Aida. Now, Aida originally opened on March 23rd of the year 2000 and eventually closed on September 5th of 2004. As for the significant awards or milestones reached by the production, this musical won 4 Tony Awards in the year 2000, including Best Original Score for Elton John and Tim Rice, and Best Actress in a Musical by actress Heather Headley. Likewise, the original cast recording won a Grammy for Best Musical Show Album in the year 2001. And my gosh, does it deserve it. Now let's get into the plot of this show, as I can hear a lot of you saying, what's Aida? I've never heard of that before. Well, Aida is actually not based on a previous Disney movie or live-action movie of any kind. Set in ancient Egypt, Aida follows the forbidden love story of Princess Aida. Aida is a captured Nubian princess. She eventually falls in love with Radames, who is an Egyptian soldier. However, the problem becomes that Radames is already betrothed to Princess Amneris. As tensions arise between Egypt and Nubia, Aida and Radames are torn between their love for each other and their loyalties to their respective peoples, which eventually leads to a tragic yet transcendent ending. This musical, while quite sad, is absolutely stunning. As for the leading actors in the original Broadway production, the show was led by Heather Headley as the titular role Aida, for which she won Best Leading Actress in a Musical. And you might also recognize her name, as she also originated the role of Nala on Broadway. The role of Radames was originated by Adam Pascal, and the role of Princess Amneris was actually originated by Sherry Renee Scott, who you might recognize as the name of the original Ursula on Broadway. As for the significant story changes, well, I mean, there's nothing to compare it to, but as for the significant story changes, the musical is actually based on Giuseppe Verdi's opera rather than a Disney animated film. The story was adapted from the opera to include a modern framing device, where a museum set in contemporary time actually transitions into the ancient tale. It tells the love story of Aida and Radames in their love triangle with Princess Amneris. Spoiler alert for the Broadway show, I'm very sorry. And eventually, when Aida and Radames meet their tragic end, the two actually reincarnate as travelers who once again find each other in the Contemporary Time Museum. This is such a stunning story from start to finish. The music is perfect. The cast was beautiful and amazing. But as for the standout stage effects, a really innovative use of lighting and stage design really helped to transition the story from the contemporary times at the beginning all the way back to ancient Egypt. Likewise, the dramatic choreography and elaborate costuming really helped to highlight the cultural contrasts between the two cultures in the story. The musical Aida is so beautiful, so perfect, and I absolutely love this story. Don't get me wrong, it is very sad. It is a very tragic story, but my gosh, I love this show. And when talking about Disney's lost or forgotten princesses, so often I really want to mention Princess Aida and Princess Amneris, who are both very deep and complex characters brought to life by Disney, but I also feel like so few people know about them because they really only ever appeared on Broadway. But regardless of this, it is never going to stop my love for the Broadway musical Aida. And actually, a few years ago, it was announced that there was going to be a Broadway revival. Unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic, that eventually halted plans for that revival. But oh my gosh, I am hoping and praying that one day a revival is eventually made of Aida, so that way I will get to see it on stage. The characters, the costuming, the plot device of using the museum as both an entrance and an exit for the musical, everything about this story is stunning and beautiful and really tugs at the heartstrings, and that's exactly what theater is supposed to do. And yes, because a lot of people can deem it a forgotten Disney tale, that is why it actually ranks at #1 on my list of favorite Disney on Broadway productions. Ooh, but with that, friends, we have talked about 10 of my all-time favorite Disney on Broadway shows. Thank you so much for joining me today. I had so much fun talking about all of these wonderful Broadway productions. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic from me. And if you'd like to find me on any of my other social medias, my handle is @Nicky Marra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for even more magic beyond here on YouTube. Thank you again for watching today. I know this isn't my normal content, as I usually like to dive into Disney's animated movies or live action movies, but I really enjoyed today's video, preparing for it and also filming it, because oh my god, I'm such a theater geek at heart, and I haven't done theater in a while, but I miss it so much, and so getting to talk about it really is like so fun and sort of fills a place in my heart that I really kind of forgot that I love to explore. Yeah, that might be a little cliche, but yeah, I really had fun with this one. So if you enjoyed it too, thank you so much. It absolutely means the world to me. But with that, friends, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Stay magical, and until next week, I'll see you all real soon.